Welcome back to the PMP exam is simple. That's really what I title it. And I said there are 14 tasks in people in our last episode. This is episode 2, so for those of you that haven't watched episode 1, go watch episode 1. But in episode 2, we're going to talk about the process domain. For those of you watching, if you wanted to go through a 50-hour set of videos that cover this in more detail, going down to pmp.pmradio.org, because that will take you to my YouTube playlist where I have over 50 hours of video that you can cover all this stuff in more detail. But let's jump into process domain. So this domain is 50% of the exam. 50. That's a lot of information. And it says, go into the very first task, which is chapter 15. Chapter 15, we in the Immersion book. Let me show it up again, Raina, if you don't mind. I won't lose your page. Thank you. So Raina is tracking everything I'm saying here with our book, PMP Exam Immersion. You can find this book on Amazon. It's very different from other books in that it breaks the PMP down into 35 chapters. So instead of being like a headless chicken, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm doing. Instead of all that, get this book and you will know when you have covered each of the 35 tasks that PMI wants you to know for this test. Thank you, Raina. All right. So this first task, it says execute the project with the urgency required to deliver business value. So what is value is a question I often ask people. And you at home, I want you to think about it. What is value? Do you have a definition for value? Think about it. Because value is many things to different people. But PMI defined value as the net quantifiable benefits. So when you think about it, if you're not getting benefit, you're not getting value. There should be some kind of advantage or benefit. So PMI says execute your project urgently to deliver business value. I often think, what would have happened if Steve Jobs held onto his ideas, his team's ideas of the iPhone and the iPad for another 2 years? Well, that would be an example of not executing your project urgently. What would have happened? They probably wouldn't have been the big kahuna in the marketplace, And because they were first to market, they're reaping all those benefits, tremendous value. They're one of the hugest players in the phone industry, in the smartphone industry. Even though there's a lot of Androids, but Apple still has that reverence in the industry. So what we're saying here is that as a project manager, you want to execute your project with urgency. And that means being agile. Because agile means you're delivering incrementally and you're working in iterations. So you're releasing a little bit. Think about it. Are you an Android or Apple person?
Android.
I'm always joking. Well, I've got an Android, but I've also got, it's an Apple recording us. So I always joke. But the joke is, if you are not quick to market and urgent, someone will usurp your position. Imagine if Samsung was first to market. Oh my goodness. Or the Google boys. Well, Google is, Android is Google. Steve Jobs, he wasn't happy with Google when they did Android. He said, "You are traitors." He wasn't happy. He understood that dynamic. But the summary in task 1 is you got to assess opportunities to deliver value incrementally. Don't try to build the entire product and release it, because the ship may have sailed and you're getting second to market. It's no good. So PMI wants you to think agile, execute urgently, increments, work in iterations and increments. All right, let's go to number 2. Number 2, this is what we're just talking about. Manage communications. Now this word, manage, it's a little bit of a stern word. It sounds like the administration of systems and process and procedures. But when PMI used the word manage, it's like that friend who gives you a punch and they didn't really mean it. They're just playing. So managed communications, don't take it verbatim. It really means plan, execute on communications, monitor the communication. That's really what it means. So it says analyze the needs of the stakeholders and communicate accordingly. Let me give you a little bit of PMBOK language. So PMI says plan communications management, manage the communications, and monitor. But what does that mean? Have you ever put together a communications management plan? So it's a plan for how to communicate.
Yep.
It could be very structured. Now, in the world of Agile, we don't do that. We just have ground rules that give us a vehicle and an idea of how to communicate. But in the world of predictive, because of how the projects are, we may actually need more documentation. The world of Agile, there's a misnomer that, oh, documentation is bad. No, it's actually not true. We document in the world of Agile. It's just that we value individuals and interactions a lot more. We value working product a lot more, you know. So that's the general mindset. All right, let's go to task 3. Assess and manage risks. We talked about this, right? So what is a risk? It's an uncertain event that could affect your project positively or negatively. A lot of people get thrown off when we say positive risks. But do you know you've got negative risks or threats and positive risks or opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way you can approach these. We have 5 approaches to negative risks and 5 approaches to positive risks. And I'm just going to write this on the whiteboard. Our friends at home won't see this. But I want you to use your imagination, those of you who are watching after the fact. We have this mnemonic for negative risks. Negative. And I just say A team. What does A stand for? A is for avoid, right? Risk avoidance. T is for transfer. You can transfer the risk to a third party. E is for escalate. You can escalate the risk to your boss. If you're not able to deal with it, it's beyond your level of authority. We have A for accept. You can accept the risk and do nothing. So nothing I can do about this one, and then you can mitigate. So what is the difference between all these 3? Well, avoid is cutting off the scope or doing something to ensure that that event doesn't even happen. You got transfer, which is like insurance, which you know a lot about. There's escalate, which is escalating to your boss if it's beyond your authority or if it's outside of your project. You got A, which is, well, I guess that's what it is, and you do nothing. Or under accept, we have 2 types of accept. We have positive, we have passive accept and active accept. Passive accept is doing absolutely nothing. Active accept is putting aside a dollar amount and saying, well, if it happens, here's some money, but we ain't doing anything about it right now, but if it does happen, here's a contingency. So there's a difference between passive and active accept. And those are your negative risks or threats, all right? So just remember the mnemonic A-team, A-T-E-A-M, and that's there. But we also have positive risks. So what do we do with the positive risks? I've got another mnemonic, and this mnemonic, the mnemonic is E-A-S-E-E. So we have an accept over here. We have an escalate as well, so those are easy to remember. The new ones, we have exploit. You can exploit a risk, a positive risk, to make sure it absolutely does happen. You have enhance, which is increasing the probability or impact of the risk, but it's not as aggressive as exploit. Exploit is, we're going to make sure this 100% does happen. We're going to make sure we win the contract. We're going to throw our best people at it. We're going to throw everything we got. That's more like exploit. Enhance is just a little bit, okay, we're going to increase probability of impact. And then we have share, which is sharing the risk with a third party. And honestly, these have been around for a while. The only new one, Raina, that you and I have not talked about in the past is the escalate. All the others, we've talked about this at some point in the past. So that's it for risk. pretty much. There's 7 things that the PMI wants you to do in risk management. Those of you at home, you might want to take notes. It's going to help you organize your thoughts. So we have 7 things. Number 1 is you plan risk management. Number 2 is you identify risks. Number 3 is you perform a qualitative risk analysis. Number 4 is you do a quantitative risk analysis. Number 5 is you plan risk responses. Number 6, you implement the responses. And number 7, you monitor risk. Phil, what on earth was all that? Sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook. Let's go over it mentally. Okay, you decide to, let's say you're driving to work. You get on the freeway, right? But before you get on the freeway, you tell yourself, don't take big risks. Have you ever told yourself that? Don't take big risks, drive sensibly. So, plan risk management is when you're planning how you're going to manage the risks. You could say, okay, I'm going to take an account of what is happening on the road every few minutes and make sure I'm being safe and I'm not in a risky situation. It's an approach. So planning how to manage risk is number 1. Number 2, second thing you do is identify risk. Maybe before you leave the house, you say, oh, that 10 is always crazy. The 60 is just as bad. You know what? Let me just take an account of all the possible things that could happen. I could get lost. I could run out of gas. I could encounter a maniac. You know what? These are the potential things that could go wrong. You're just identifying them. Then you could do a qualitative risk analysis. Maybe you're now in the process of driving and you're thinking, should I overtake this person? There's a risk. It may not end well if I do, because let's say you got this dual carriage and you got to go on this side to overtake, and you're looking at the distance between you and the oncoming traffic. You do a quick analysis. Is it worth it? It's kind of like a qualitative. A quantitative risk analysis is where you're more precise and you're putting a dollar amount. And in the world of risk, we do both. You do a qualitative, high, medium, low, and then you do a quantitative in some companies, which is going into the actual dollar amount. And then the probability from a scientific perspective. You look at probability in percent, you look at impact in dollars, you multiply them. In PMI's world, we call that expected monetary value. Mm-hmm. So you could go really deep into that stuff, but it's one of the things that you should know about for the exam. Then you plan risk responses based on which risks are the hugest, the big ones that can just make our project vanish. Then you go after those big ticket ones, the ones that aren't as significant. You put them on your risk register still, but they fall to the bottom of the risk register. So that's kind of what you do in risk planning. And when you're done planning the responses for each risk using either the avoidance or transfer or so on, or you identify positive risk. Because you know what PMs are guilty of, Raina? A lot of them, they don't plan for positive risk. It's all negative. Do you ever see a silver lining or pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? No, it's all just, no, it can't be all negative. So PMI encourages us to think about positive and negative. Long story short, you then implement your response. So all of these other strategies like transfer, avoid, escalate, and mitigate, you have to do something. The only one that you don't do anything about is accept. So accept is, it's gonna happen, here's some money, let's put it aside. So that's a summary of task 3, a lot of information on that one. All right, task 4 is engage stakeholders. So there's 4 things that the PMI wants you to do in this world. Number 1 is you got to identify them. So you got to identify your stakeholders and put them in a stakeholder register. And then you analyze them, and then you begin to effectively engage them. Kind of what you said in the people domain. You said one of the things you do is you send reminders. Hey, this is what we're going to talk about. It also relates with this. But Rayna, let me show you there's a difference between people domain stakeholder and process stakeholder discussion. And the difference is in the people domain, it's more about the empathetic, touchy-feely psychology behind it. In the process domain is all about the method. So the PMI, they get pretty specific. There's 4 things. You got to identify your stakeholders. You got to plan stakeholder engagement. Then you got to manage stakeholder engagement, which is doing what you said, sending out the email. Maybe the stakeholder has been evading you, and you meet them in the cafeteria at the water cooler because you know they are always at the water cooler at this time of the day. That's managing the engagement. And then we have monitor the engagement, which is pretty much saying, how well am I doing, stakeholder? Are you happy about the project? Am I engaging you properly, and so on? All right, so that's engage stakeholders. Let's go to the next chapter, and this is going over to task 5 in process. Plan and manage budget and resources. So there's two things here. There's budget and there's resources. Again, this is what makes process hard, Raina, because under this section, we have 4 things in budget or costs and 6 things in resources that you got to know. And the 4 things in the budget area, which is cost management, they want you to plan cost management, estimate costs for each activity, determine the budget by rolling them up into a final total, and then control the cost. So it kind of goes from planning, get your budget, and then manage it. For resource management, there's 6 things. Number 1, plan resource management. How am I going to manage the resources? Number 2, they want you to estimate the activity resources. So what resources do I need? Human, equipment, material, supplies, facilities. I know you know all about that stuff, like how many resources, how much. They want you to do that. Then they want you to acquire the resources. And that means human, equipment, material, supplies, facilities. Whatever you need to acquire, acquire it. Then we go into developing the team. So we leave the physical resources aside, but we focus on training, development, synergy of the team, and then managing the team. And managing the team is just giving feedback. The word management is kind of not the best, but PMI stuck with it. I would have rather said lead team. But the name of that particular process is called manage team. But managing the team is all about feedback. It's really leadership. And then we have a final one, which is control resources. So the 11 things, those at home, I hope you're taking notes because, you know, if you're really getting ready for PMP exam, these tiny little processes, you gotta know them. All right, let's go to task 6, plan and manage schedule. Have you ever used Microsoft Project or Plan View or Smartsheet?
Smartsheet, Excel.
Those, good.
Project.
So how do you go about building a schedule in those? Want to share? How do you do that?
Well, I get the goal date and then work backwards. So if somebody says we've got an ERP implementation, it needs to be done in 2 years, then I put my 2-year goal date down and then work backwards.
Fantastic. And who else do you work with in building the schedule?
Resources, stakeholders, surveying, internal business units that the ERP system will support.
Mm-hmm. So, you know the funny thing, Raina, you got so much
Some
experience.
suppliers.
There you go, yeah. You got a lot of experience, but you know there are people who would hear this and they're terrified. How do I do that? How do I bring everyone in the room? You want to give some tips?
Continuous communication, make sure that your communication plan has outlined all of your, not just stakeholders, but inputs to the project.
You are obviously an experienced PM. I tell you, some people, they don't feel they can do this. But the good thing for you on the exam, this is going to make sense to you because you've done it. So PMI says estimate project tasks. You pretty much alluded to, I get my end date and then I work backwards to today and fill in the gaps, which is pretty much this. PMI says utilize benchmarks, prepare the schedule based on methodology, modify as needed, coordinate with other projects and other operations, pretty much what you said. So that's task 6. PMI have in their world 6 things. Number 1, plan, schedule management. Number 2, define activities, list out all the activities. Number 3, sequence the activities, put them in the order of occurrence. Number 4, estimate activity durations. And then number 5, develop the schedule. Voila, you put all that together, you got your schedule. And number 6, control the schedule. to make sure you don't deviate. All right, that's task 6. Let's go to 7. Plan and manage quality of products or deliverables. So the PMI says in this one, determine quality standards, recommend options for improvement, and continually survey project deliverable quality. But again, there's an alternate terminology that PMI has in the 49 processes, and they just say plan quality management, manage quality, and control quality. And what that means is plan how to manage quality, do quality assurance, do inspection or quality control. There's 4 things I like defining quality, and you'll probably find it in the book. I define quality as 4 things. Number 1 is fitness for use. Number 2 is conformance to requirements. Number 3 is customer satisfaction. And number 4 is Kaizen. So fitness for use, conformance to requirements, customer satisfaction, and Kaizen. Well, do you agree, Raina, that if customer satisfaction is not achieved, is it possible that quality has been achieved if customer is unhappy?
Yes, because the product may be at the specific quality. It's managing the expectations of the customer.
Beautiful, you got it. You got that memo. And honestly, that's PMI's view as well. This is why I know you're going to do so great on the exam, Raina, because you done it. You've been there. You understand it. And that's the world of PMI. Great stuff. Let's go to number 8. Number 8, oh my goodness. This one is one of the most nebulous areas in the real world. And this is where PMPs can shine and can actually get so much experience. It's plan and manage scope. If someone comes onto the project that is oblivious to the world of PMI and you ask them what is scope, they may have an idea, but they cannot tell you in discrete steps how to define the scope, which is where the PMP is just invaluable. I found this in my real world project management. Honestly, I became a beast after I got certified and I knew how to go about defining scope. There's very few companies that will interview me about this area and will not say, yeah, we're going to hire him. So there's 6 things. Number 1, plan scope management. Plan how you're going to manage scope is number 1. Number 2 is collect the requirements. And there's a document that PMI call a requirements traceability matrix. They want you to fill one of those in so you track each requirement to their origin. This is not, well, I think I want this. No, this is like clear as day. This is what you said you want, and you said it. This is how we're going to test it. This is a use case for it. And then this is how we know that you've accepted it when we do the final testing. So it's very specific, and it's hard to say, well, I didn't know what you wanted when everything is very clearly written out. Then we do define scope. And define scope gives you a project scope statement. But what is a project scope statement? It's a document with inclusions and exclusions. You ever had the customer that said, well, I thought the project was going to do that, but no, it's limited to this. So except you spell it out, some customers, they just don't know. So PMI says you should define scope. And then we have WBS, it's talked about here as well. Create WBS, a work breakdown structure. For those at home that haven't seen it, a WBS looks like a family tree. It breaks the work down from the top all the way down to the bottom. We call them work packages, and it becomes very clear what needs to be done, broken down by hierarchy, usually deliverable oriented. Some people have no choice and they make it phase oriented, but it's not a timeline. It's just a deliverable oriented breakdown of the project. And then the last 2 things we do in scope, we get our customer to actually sign off on what was done. So they do an inspection and they say, okay, I approve. If there are 100 requirements, they go through each one and say, yeah, I've tested it. Or they find someone to do it for them. And then we have control scope, which is just generally making sure people don't gold plate. Because you ever worked with a team where people want to be the Superman or Superwoman? Customer ain't asking for that. Why are you doing that? Well, I just thought it would be a nice addition. Don't do it. You know. So that's control scope, and PMI says you should do that as well. All right, let's go into task 9. Integrate project planning activities. this one is so easy. It just means make sure everything's moving along cohesively. That's just it. In the world of PMI for integration, there's some things that help us be cohesive. And there's 7 processes in integration. There's develop the project charter, develop a project management plan, direct and manage the project work, manage the project knowledge through lessons learned and retrospectives all throughout the project. You ever been on a team that says, well, I guess we'll just do lessons learned at the end? You should have been doing it all through because you made all these dumb mistakes. You don't want other people in the firm to make them on their projects. So we say manage project knowledge all through. Then we go into monitor and control project work, which is where you create these reports. You know those, Raina, those reports that we work on, that management is frothing at the mouth, sometimes waiting, let's say where the project is. You ever had those? I like those stakeholders actually that are interested in the reports. And you know, the thing, some project managers are scared of such. No, I'm not scared of those stakeholders. I like them because they are interested in the project status, the project's updates, and that's a good sign. So we call that monitor and control project work. Then we have perform integrated change control, which is change requests. And you know all about that. You know, we won't go into all your background in change management, but a change request comes into the project. It should be reviewed, taken to the change control board, and eventually it's going to be approved or rejected. And then last but not least in integration, we have close the project or close a phase in a project, called close project or phase. So that's task 9. All right, let's go a little bit quicker. Number 10, manage project changes. This just means managing any kind of change on the project. Change to the product, change to the process, and others. Number 11, plan and manage procurement. So this is your area. So PMI gives you 3 things here. Number 1, plan procurement management. Number 2, conduct the procurement, like get the proposals back from potentials, go through them, use source selection criteria to choose. And then the last one is called control procurement, which means make sure you got what you paid for. You know, the sneaky little vendors, they be trying to give you less or they delivering late. No, we don't like that. All right, number 12, manage project artifacts. So an artifact could be a document, it could be a widget, it could be a version of something you did in the past. And PMI just says have version control, have configuration management so that every document, every widget, every aspect is versioned. If you're in the world of construction and engineering, every bolt, we have the configuration knowing, okay, we changed that from an 11 millimeter to 12. Everything is so version controlled that the margin of error becomes very small. Number 13, determine appropriate project methodology, methods, and practices. So if we're going to be agile, let's understand why we're agile. Those of you at home, what exactly is agile? Take a few seconds and let me see what you come up with. Hit the pause button and think about what agile is. Now, I always tell people, agile is not a framework. It's not a methodology. What is it? Thinking first. Because, you know, as the good book says, it's a man thinks, so is he, and it's true. If you're thinking agile, you will be agile. But a lot of people don't understand. It's a mindset. Agile is a mindset that translates into behaviors to pivot to the ever-changing world around you. And we got examples. Blockbuster is a good example of how not. How not to be unagile, because Blockbuster, they weren't quick, they weren't fast, they weren't nimble. Because Netflix came at them and said, hey, we got this company, want to buy it for 50 million? I'm like, get away from us, you filthy varmints, we're not buying your company. Go away. And they're on their hands and knees begging, please buy us. They said, no, we're not buying you. What happened? Netflix got the memo and knew where the market was going. They were agile, they were able to pivot. Blockbuster. And they go partner with Enron, of all people, Enron. They had this weird approach to watching videos online using Enron's infrastructure. Anyway, it failed. And as the story goes, where's Blockbuster today? Sorry, Blockbuster. No, you don't even exist. No, sorry for you. You don't exist. But we have other examples. Another joke in industry is, you know, Kodak. Kodak They had all the time in the world to get into the infrastructure for hardware and software for digital photography. But what did Kodak do? Well, I guess we should just stay where we are with the same old hardware. Why is that? Well, if we go to digital, what's going to happen to all our hardware that we've worked all these years on? Seriously? So who comes along? Steve Jobs, the Apple people, the Tim Cook and co. And they take over the world of digital photography. No matter how, I'm sorry, my Android friends, no matter how well Samsung does, Apple will always be the big kahuna in photography. They will always be. Samsung, they got a little bit aggressive and they came out with this, what do you call it? Is it the S24? Is it the S25? I can't remember. They came out with this model, 200 megapixels. And it's very tantalizing. A lot of people have gone over to the Samsung side. But what I'm saying is they pivoted to the market demand as much. And they got a lawsuit because they were following Apple so close. And Apple said, you're copying us. But they were trying to be agile. So I actually don't begrudge them. I think they got slapped with hundreds of millions of lawsuits. But we don't know what happened because the Samsung people were providing chips for the Apple people. So it's a kind of a complicated dynamic. But when you see people trying to pivot to keep, I can't begrudge them for trying. Let them work it out in court. So what I'm saying is that in this world of PMP, they want you to be agile. They want you to think, what is the best way for me to work this project? And that's why they said determine the appropriate project methodology, because if I can do things agile, I want to deliver quick. All right, number 14. We got a few minutes right now. I talked my way out of this whole thing. All right, 14. I didn't mean us to go this long, but it is interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting subject? Or is it just me making it interesting?
No, it's you.
Thank you. I hope PMI are taking notes. All right, number 14. Establish project governance structure. You know all about this. PMI say governance is a framework within which authorities exercise. You can either have tight governance or you can kind of relax it a little bit. And you got to determine what is best. So it says determine appropriate governance for a project. Let's go to number 15. Manage project issues. There's a document in business that we use for this, and it's called an issue log. Some people call it a rolling action item list, or risks, actions, issues, and decisions. RAID log or something like that. And there are many ways. The key thing, PMI just wants you to recognize when a risk becomes an issue. It becomes a different thing because a risk is an uncertain event, but an issue is a realized risk.
Yep.
And you no longer have the opportunity of saying, well, we'll treat it so it doesn't happen. It's happened. So what are you going to do? So PMI say, recognize when a risk becomes an issue, attack the issue with the optimal action to achieve project success, and collaborate with relevant stakeholders. All right, let's go to the next chapter. This one's a no-brainer for anyone that's been in the water business, anywhere in the world. Ensure knowledge transfer for project continuity. True story, I was working on this pharmaceutical lab project, company name withheld, although some people will know who I'm talking about. But we're working on this project with this company. They brought Praizion in to work on this big WBS. We worked with a huge work breakdown structure for 2 days. But there was one of the engineers that I was so concerned about. You know why? He knew everything that the others didn't. One person walking around with this idea, this big brain idea, and no one else knows. Well, they failed at number 16, ensure knowledge transfer. I'm like, heavens forbid, he's hit by a bus. What happens? What happens to all the knowledge? The project goes away because he knew everything. And that's really not the best way to do it. You want that knowledge to be transferred. And that's what PMI is saying. Discuss project responsibilities with the team, outline expectations, confirm approach, but you got to share knowledge. When it boils down to the nitty gritty, you got to share knowledge. All right, here's the final one in the process domain. Plan and manage project or phase closures or transition. So determine the criteria to successfully close the project, release the resources, write the report. You know, you've done this stuff. But our friends at home, in the world of PMI, they want you to release resources. In the world of predictive, in the world of agile, we don't release the team. The team just moves on to whatever endeavor is next. But you want to document where the project left off, whether it's a success or not. And then you also want to make sure that you close out each item, cost center, we call them, and release the resources back to the firm. Someone said, well, just go blow the extra money on a party. No, that's not how it works. All right. Well, we did very well, Raina, considering this is 17 tasks. We are now done with the process domain. And don't forget, the questions are always going to be Raina is project manager on a large infrastructure project. She has accomplished 24 milestones in 23 days. They give you all this fluff. And the fluff is hard to go over when you're in exam mode because you want to read everything. But a lot of it, in my mind, is red herrings and delay tactics. And then it gets to the questions. What should Raina do? A, B, C, D, and you got to choose the best. And there's always two that are like, and honestly, the answer key just lies in a little bit of a minutia that you need to pay attention to, and then you'll be good. All right, my friends, I'll see you in the next episode. And thank you to Raina for being a great student. I know she's going to get certified in a blink of an eye because you got the experience. And look at you, you showed up for your success.